back, my little nightmare. What? Welcome back, my little nightmares. I don't know what that came from. And this is the redo of part 2 of the Erised effect. The drinker. Well, that's hardly bloody fair, Theo huffed as a vial with pink swirled liquid was put in front of him on the table. Gotta play by the rules, Harry muttered, sounding affronted as the same vial was also placed in front of him. If everyone else has signed the disclaimer, but Draco hasn't, then you know better than to think I would play by the same rules as everyone else, Potter. Draco told him in a mocking tone as he took a deep sip of his whiskey and accepted the vial that Pansy had passed him over the table. Did our time playing Quidditch at Hogwarts not teach you anything? Or the time he nearly got ruined by the hippogriff, Blaise pointed out. Or the time he got turned into a white rodent, Theo pointed out matter-of-factly. What about the time he nearly offed old Dumbledore? Blaise replied. Hermione and Harry scowled at him. May God rest his soul. He added quickly, making a cross sign in front of him. Or the time when he nearly threw himself through the stupid bloody cabinet in frustration. Theo laughed wholeheartedly. Hermione heard Malfoy draw in an impatient deep breath. It wasn't uncommon for Blaise and Theo to mock him for his previous dark deeds. He usually took it in his stride and bided his time until he was able to get them back with some sort of sarcastic and usually quite witty retort. But tonight did not seem like the night for that. There are no rules if it is the drinker's choice. Pansy cut in, silencing the boys when she spotted the look of tension on Draco's face. He seemed to be grappling with himself. Hermione could sense it from where he sat, almost as if he thought he was making a very big mistake by signing the contract. Well, if I can't see his, then he can't see mine, Theo announced petulantly. I can read. Petulantly. Poking a finger in Draco's direction. I don't want to see yours, Theo. You'll put me off sausage for life, Draco said darkly, earning a titter from a few around the table. What was that? Theo asked sarcastically. Putting a hand on his ear, cupping it in Draco's direction. Jumbo hot dog, you say? Oh, you do compliment me, Draco. More like cocktail sausage, mate. Have a strong word with yourself, yeah? Draco bantered back, and Hermione tensed as she chanced to glance at Pansy. She saw her eyes sparkle when the mention of sausage size came into the equation. Gosh, have mercy upon her soul. Her train of thought always seemed to lead her back there, and Pansy didn't help. Once the floodgates of the dirtbag that was Pansy Parkinson had been opened, there was no stopping her. Several times Hermione had choked on air whilst in work as a dirty little fact of a smutty little musing had made its way out of Pansy's mouth. The worst one was just shy of 2 months ago, as they stood together in the lingerie section of the shop, fixing the array of bras and knickers on the shelf. Did you see him sitting down last night? Pansy asked innocently as she fixed a pair of frilly French knickers back onto their hanger. He looked so uncomfortable. towards the end of the night. Hermione tried her best to ignore her. She knew exactly where Pansy was going with this, and if she let the girl bait her, then there would be no stopping the filth that would spill out of her mouth. Specifically, filth about Draco Malfoy, of course. I hadn't noticed, Hermione replied casually, as she always did, hoped that Pansy would drop the subject. But Pansy Parkinson did never drop the subject. I think that armchair isn't the only thing that of his what? I think the armchair is the only one that offered him a little relief from the pressure in the particular area. Pansy mused innocently. I mean, I know he has his pants tailored to look baggier in the crotch area, but you can plainly see that he must be uncomfortable packing. Pansy? Pansy. Hermione moaned at her and drew in a breath as she picked up a stray bra from off the floor. Stop, just stop. Pansy paid absolutely no attention. I suppose it can't be helped, though, with the way he looks at you when you're not looking. One of Pansy's eyebrows shot into the air as Hermione turned to her and gave her a suspicious look. When you find something funny, but you know you shouldn't laugh, you bite your lip. Hermione frowned. Draco likes that. Hermione's mouth went dry. He likes to bite and be bitten while he's effing. That I know of, or involved in any type of foreplay. Pansy smirked at the blush on Hermione's lips. I think it's a paraphilia called Oxenlangeana. Probably said that wrong, but I tried. It is generally considered a mild form of sadomasochism, but I think Draco just gets off on it, the feel of the skin between your teeth. Hermione drew in another deep breath. If he's close and you put your mouth in the right place. Hermione put 2 fingers against the pulse point on her neck as she looked at Hermione. If you use your lips to massage the area, add your tongue to moisten it, and then sink your teeth in just the right moment. Hermione clenched her thighs at the thought. The sounds he'll make for you, Granger, he'll be all yours. Hermione shook her head to try and get rid of the imagery, but the thought of biting down on Draco Malfoy's neck and hearing the deep rumbling sounds erupt from his throat as he finished for her were just too much. Would he talk to her through it? Would he want to tell her she was a good girl? Why the fuck is this a thing? And then there's just me. What the fuck is this? There's different friends in the world, and I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Slow down. Think it over. Tell me. Would he want to be buried deep inside her while he did that for her? To achieve the most intense finishing he would probably ever have. As soon as he saw you bite your bottom lip last night, I knew exactly what he was thinking. Pansy smirked, continuing her onslaught. His eyes were so dark they were practically blown wide. Granger, in his head, he had you straddling him over the armchair he was occupying, and he was rocking your hips down onto his, effing you through your clothes. He loves doing that. Oh, gosh. Darn it. Not now, Mom. She just texted me. And she's supposed to be at work. Not on her phone. Mm-hmm. They were, Hermione gulped and closed her eyes at the imagery momentarily. He knows he can get a woman. Turn it, Mom! Just go to work! She just literally wants to get the Verizon deal for 5G. And I'm like, I'll get an iPhone 12 if you guys get iPhone minis. I'll trade in my iPhone for anything. I don't mind. I mean, it's good. It's in good condition. It's an XR. I just 5G sounds freaking awesome right now because my dad's internet doesn't work for shit. For my phone, anyways. He was rocking. Okay. He knows he can get a woman off just by rubbing her intimately against him. When you feel it up close like that, you realize just how uncomfortable he really must be sitting down. But the power he puts into each thrust would have you bouncing on his lap. Pansy shrugged. But then, what is a big penis worth if there's no power, stamina, or passion behind it? That's true. Have you ever heard of the term, it's not the size that counts, asshole, it's how you use it? Yes, I just quoted Chucky from Bride of Chucky for some odd reason, but it's a true statement. Okay. People need to stop talking. Not you, but stop texting me. You could have texted me at any other freaking time, not now. Sorry, I'm having a panic attack because I know what's happening. What happens? I literally read ahead a lot, and popped Molly, I'm sweat. Damn, that's too old for me. Okay. Hermione's eyes went wide, and she dropped another bra onto the floor in a fluster. Pansy giggled. Draco has the power whether he's holding you in his arms or making you feel protected, or he's pinned you down against a desk in the potions classroom after hours. The force of him is something unmatched. Pansy's eyes glinted devilishly. He would be on his knees for you in minutes, though if you let him, he's strong then. If you let him, is he strong then? Hermione asked weakly, trying to ignore the last thing Pansy said and feeling like her knees would give out on her. Granger, Pansy told her pointedly. He put me on a desk, opened my legs, and effed me with his fingers so hard that the desk rattled against the floor before it started to move about a foot from its starting point. Hermione put a hand over her mouth in a shocked motion, and he wouldn't let me finish until I told him how much my walls wanted to clench around his beep. Hermione gasped and Pansy giggled at her. He's not an animal, though, Granger. Quite the opposite, actually. Pansy gave her a small smile. He has a lot of passion, and he always makes sure the lady finishes first. Although he's only ever finished into a hand afterwards, so Hermione couldn't help herself. How do you know he's never finished inside of a woman? Pansy's eyes lit up devilishly. I knew that little fact got you all hot and bothered. She laughed gleefully, then fixed Hermione with a look. Because when he was drunk, he talks, and if I'm not mistaken from what he said in the past, I think he's all but given up hope of trying now. She gave Hermione a little wink. But if only there was someone who could volunteer to get past that barrier with him and give it a bloody good go. Hermione's back straightened. I don't know of anyone, sorry. For Zeus! Hermione, if you let Draco get hold of you, then he'd break you in half. Hermione spluttered. Imagine the power in those thighs as he inched his way inside of you slowly. Even when he stretches your legs wide, it would probably take him a few minutes to get all the way in, considering the size of him and the size of you. Hermione bit her lip. He'd bite that lip for you too. And then, when he finally started rocking inside of you, he'd be so far up he'd hit your cervix. Probably get you pregnant after the first pump against your womb. Pansy! Hermione hissed. That is uncalled for. The black-haired girl shrugged. I think he has a breeding fetish. Somewhere deep down, Hermione gaped at the woman. Gaped at the girl, but it's more woman. What? Her mind boggled. There was so much kinky complex to this man. It was making her feel like the multiple layers of Draco Malfoy were never ending. And it won't end. And he will tell you a little bit more about that. That's a spoiler, but hey. Pansy raised an eyebrow and put a hand on her hip as she put a bra back in its place on the shelf. That's a different story, Granger. One for another time. No more stories, Hermione thought. Hermione couldn't take any more stories. Hermione, do you agree, or would you rather stay here? Hermione frowned, having lost conversation completely. She was really bad at this lately. Knowing that she needed to keep up the conversation, but found herself so often floating away into her own sordid fantasies. What was that? Sorry? She asked politely, and saw Pansy looking at her knowingly. She took a large gulp of her drink. I wasn't listening. You haven't missed much, Malfoy drawled in a low tone from above her, sending shivers down her spine as she realized that he had stood up and put on his coat as to leave. Mostly just Theodore chatting absolute bollocks about how all his fantasies included wax and butt plugs. I'm not going to do the S scenes for the mirror because they're so long. I will say like how they started, like, because that's important detail, but like like a paragraph and that's it. That's pretty much what it's going to be. And it might not be able to just go into it. The butt plugs are for women, Theo shouted over defensively, his closed umbrella pointing accusingly at Draco in Draco's direction. So he says. Draco's answered him mockingly, pointing back at Theo as he buttoned up his black overcoat. Hermione could see Malfoy look over in her direction and give her a small smile out of the corner of her eye. But she just couldn't muster up the courage to look at him. If she did, she feared he would see right through her and he would know all the illicit images that popped into her head whenever she so much as looked in his direction. She wondered if he had noticed the slow change in her over the last few years. They had always been civil and courteous to each other since Harry had brought him into the group. This, Draco Malfoy, was merely a small reminder to her of his former self. An unlikely, gentle, and quiet outcome to what he could have turned into. Hermione hated his former self, and one thing stopping her from jumping his bones was the thought of his sneering face during school. He never sneered at her now, though. He listened to her intently, and when they conversed with each other, Hermione always got the sense that she understood him as much as he understood her. He was polite and quiet and kept to himself. At first, it put Hermione on edge as she found it hard to find ways to trust him, but now she knew that along with the others, she could also trust Draco Malfoy with her life. Trusting him with her life wasn't the problem, though. It was trusting herself around him to not make an absolute fool of herself. She felt like a schoolgirl with a silly crush on a popular boy. It felt so immature to her, but she couldn't help it. Every part of him intimidated her and made her feel like she couldn't breathe when he was around her. Thank gosh she only saw him on the Friday nights. She'd be a pining mess of if she had to be around him more often. We're going to Draco's, Granger. Pansy practically squeaked with excitement. Apparently, Harry is against the idea of taking the potion in the middle of the crowded pub in case he gets too excited during his fantasy and everyone sees his finishing face. Harry shook his head in defeat. That's not exactly that's what you meant. Pansy batted his arm matter-of-factly. Let's just call a spade or a shovel, Theo interrupted. That way you can use it to bury yourself when you've died. The complete humiliation of anyone seeing this. Theo opened his mouth, stuck out his tongue, put his head back, and rolled his eyes to the back of the head. What the fuck is that, Theodore? Blaise asked, looking disgusted as he zipped up his coat. Because if that's your finishing face, then I genuinely wonder how you've ever gotten a woman into bed. It's too late by then, mate. Theo winked at him, put his woolly hat messily on top of his head. Past the point of no return, and if she doesn't like it, she can just close her eyes, lay back, and think of England. I don't know what that means, but okay. I'd think of anything to get that image out of my head, bondage torture included. Hermione laughed, putting her scarf around her neck. Hermione heard the laughs from everyone, but she noticed Malfoy stilled his actions and slow them down as he fixed his coat collar just within her eye line. Didn't have you down for a bit of kink, Miss Granger? Blaise answered her with a wiggle of his eyebrows. Had you pegged as a bit of a vanilla, my favorite joke of the year coming, as innocent as a nun in a cucumber field. I'm going to use that. Please. Oh, my goodness. Theo butted in jovially. Pansy scoffed as she put her handbag over her shoulder. Oh, please. I could turn your blood cold with the kinky toys Granger has bought from our store over the years. She turned and grinned wickedly at Hermione, who felt her blush returning. Remember that potion you bought to help you climax loudly? Harry choked and sputtered on thin air and put his hands over his ears. Pansy! Hermione berated, stuck for words, mortified. Hermione's chanced to glance over everyone for the reaction. Eventually, her eyes traveled to the blondes in the blonde man's direction. Malfoy was stock still, not facing her as his back was to her, but his shoulders seemed to move slightly for a second, like he was taking a deep breath. Granger the Screamer. Now there's an image, Theo said wickedly, and Blaise chuckled. No. That's the problem, Pansy said gleefully, and Hermione really hated the fact that she had even told Pansy this sensitive little tidbit of information. She doesn't make sound. No one has ever been able to make her scream. They're lucky to get a moan out of her. You're a quiet one, Granger, Blaise asked her curiously. Is it because you're embarrassed or is it because nobody has hit the right notes for you, so to speak? I'm not answering, Hermione started in protest. Don't be modest, Granger, Pansy told her with a shake of her head. Hermione here has only ever had an finishing by herself. Men have tried but failed to conquer her fortress. Hermione was about to retaliate, but a small sound from Draco was standing from where Draco was standing had stopped her. It was a small noise and it was barely audible, but it sounded like a gluttony type of gluttony and dangerous. It sounded guttural and dangerous that it caught her attention. Draco Malfoy was listening to the conversation intently. Granger. Oh, wait. Granger. Why didn't you say? Theo asked her, arms outstretched in a sympathetic gesture. You only need ask. I mean, give me 5 minutes with you and you'll what? Disappoint her even more? Hermione felt like she was holding her breath as Malfoy's low voice came out like a growl. Theo cocked an eyebrow at the tall blonde. And you think you can do better with the girl? He asked mockingly. Tell us, oh great and all-knowing one, what would you do to get her making noises for you then? Hermione felt her head spinning as she looked over at Malfoy. He was looking sideways at Theo, a hand resting against the fireplace as his back was still to her. For a moment, everyone stood in silence, nobody daring to make a sound. I find getting a girl to talk is usually the best way to start, Draco eventually replied. And Pansy was almost wetting herself with excitement as she looked over at Hermione as he spoke. After that, anything else is fair game. Hermione felt the need to close her eyes and let his words wash over her. A bit of dirty talk. She'll be begging for anything you give her. Theo asked him with a raised eyebrow, shouting your name from the rooftops like she's at Sunday church. Draco chuckled darkly, and the sound shot directly into Hermione's core. Harry's just did a Drary last night. Go check that out, by the way. Something like that. Yeah, he said, rubbing the back of his neck with one hand. Every time. Hermione swallowed thickly and didn't know where to put her eyes. She gave details away, but then never really gave anything away at all. Like he was letting her take a peek into his world, but then pulling back at the last second. Harry had his hands covering his face now as Hermione wanted to die. "Do you want to borrow my shovel when I'm done with it?" he asked her quietly from beside her. She felt a flush creep all over her skin, and as she growled at Pansy, she couldn't help but She couldn't help the knowing thought of exactly why the witch had gone there and told them all her private intimate details in the first place. Hermione knew Pansy's eyes moved slightly, a subtle movement in Draco's direction. Braving another glance, Hermione looked over at him. Only this time, with his back to her, she watched him click his neck, shoulder muscles by pulling his head from side to side. Yeah, I can do that. I'm not like burly though, so it doesn't look sexy. Guess, I don't know, people like that. He kept his head down and buttoned up his coat and stood back from everyone else, seeming the need to take this time with something. Hermione looked back at Pansy and frowned. Pansy's eyes lit up when Hermione looked at her. As the small group of men made their way to the fireplace besides Draco, ready to flew to Draco's little flat in Kent, Hermione grabbed Pansy's elbow and squeezed as she went past her. "What did you do that for?" she hissed quietly, fixing her with a stern look. "You were so embarrassing." "Hey, it had the desired effect, didn't it? Though, believe me," Pansy whispered back in her ear. As Pansy said the words, a flash of gray caught Hermione's attention in front of her. She looked up to see Draco looking at her through the small mirror at the side of the fireplace. Expression unreadable, as always, but his eyes engulfed her. She felt a hot and heavy weight start to travel all the way from her stomach into her core. Pansy's breath was next to her ear as she whispered in low, but Hermione never took her eyes off of him. From Draco's. "We've made him imagine what it would be like to make you moan for him," she said coyly. "He likes to be the first, Granger," she added. It made a single shiver down Hermione's spine. "He wants to be the one to make you scream." "Nice place you've got here, Malfoy," Harry admired. "Much better than you moping around that big bloody mansion like a lonely half-breed giant." "I'm still decorating," was all Draco said as he shed his coat and put it over the arm of the black leather armchair. "Where's the greens and silvers?" Theo asked mockingly as he stepped out of the flue and looked around at the white painted walls and the Georgian. Yeah, I just fucked that up. Yeah. I can say words. Georgian. I thought I said that right. Georgian styled furniture. Probably saying it wrong, but don't let me down, Draco. I feel fully expected vanishing cabinets and basilisks running around in the pipework, and heir of Slytherin, beware, all over that bollocks. It's old school, mate. The bedroom gives off a bit of a Death Eatery vibe, though, if that satisfies your stereotypical views. Draco answered in a deadpan tone, and with a swish of his wand, a silver platter appeared. Sorry, my thing was getting really, really greasy for some reason. I don't have anything on my hands. No, I don't. Okay. Answered in a deadpan tone with a swish of his wand. A silver platter appeared on the table with tumbler, glasses, whiskey, and red wine. Hermione's preferred choice of poison. You're a bad, bad man, Mr. Malfoy. Jesus. What did I just say? I didn't say that. I said cheese, right? I need to not read this anymore. It's turning me into a person I don't like. Okay. You're a bad, bad man, Mr. Malfoy, Theo replied as he took a tumbler and filled his glass. The women must run a mile when you put on your mask. Hermione chanced to glance at Draco, who settled himself down casually in a leather armchair and gestured for everyone to take a seat. Only the ones who don't enjoy a little scare. Only the ones who don't enjoy a little scare. Hermione felt his eyes look over at her momentarily. The scream is half the fun, though. If tensing her thighs wouldn't have attracted attention, then she would have done so. She would have taken deep, calming breaths and counted to 10 to escape the thoughts of Draco Malfoy laying her on his bed, making her scream for him. Oh gosh, how she wanted to scream for him. She wanted to wrap her thighs around his head and ride his tongue until her hips were shuddering under his skilled lips. She wanted him to pick her up, throw her against the nearest wall, and force his way inside her, making her really scream for him. But that's all child's play compared to what Draco Malfoy apparently got up to between the sheets. According to the Wikipansia, to satisfy his frustrations at the lack of penetrative sex. Shit. Gotta bleep that one out too. Gosh darn it. Intercourse. I guess I can say that, technically. Draco Malfoy intended to spend his time pleasing women in the bedroom, all different kinds of kinky and dominating ways, choosing to finish himself off later, away from prying eyes. I really do hope you all catch my fantasy about Daphne Greengrass playing the part of the Swedish milkmaid who can't find a cow to milk and lands her eyes upon me and upon yours truly in her desperate hour of need. Ew. Theo's fucked up. Theo's voice cut Jubilee through her train of thought. She had good technique. And in that little scene, Pansy eyed him and pursed her lips. You disgust me, Theodore. Truly. I hope Mine is the threesome I've always wanted, Blaze trailed in as he slouched in his seat next to Harry. Almost got my wish a few years ago. Just didn't bank on it being two males who propositioned me. Draco shook his head but kept quiet. I was rather hoping mine might be something to do with Quidditch, Harry started. Oh, yes, Theo interrupted, sounding nostalgic. The timeless classic, getting your knob gobbled behind the Quidditch stands fantasy. All four boys sighed, nodded in agreement, and went into their own little worlds momentarily. Hermione and Pansy were left crinkling their noses at the thought. You do realize that none of you are in control of what your fantasies are about, aren't you? Hermione asked them all curiously. There are a mixture of furrowed brows and surprise and widened eyes. This potion is designed to bring forward your deepest, darkest sexual fantasies. Damn it! Gotta bleep that out too! Unless they can't see my face. And I can just limit the ads on my videos, which is fine with me. I found out that a lot of people don't want to read this series because I looked at, I said that you can have one in the front, one in the back, and some in the middle. I looked at it, and they had all the ads in the front part of the video, and it was 20 ads, and they went, are you serious right now? Who the fuck does that? Ay. Really, things that you really want, whether you want to admit it. Wait, what? Things that you really want, whether you admit it or not, admit them to yourselves or not. She felt Draco rest his stare on her intently, like he was trying to read her mind, find out her own fantasies, find out what made her tick, then use it against her in the most perviously delicious ways. Well, shit, Hermione heard Blaze say, and looked up. So it could be anything, anything. Scared we'll find out about your love for bestiality, Zabini. Pansy laughed at him and drank her wine. Poor Granger. She'll be a nervous wreck between you and Mr. Darkin Broding over there. Draco shifted in his seat as if realizing that this was indeed an issue. He really was about to let Hermione peer into his thoughts, like he was at risk of showing her how deeply depraved he really was. Still thinking it's unfair that we're all airing out our dirty laundry. But dear Draco, over there gets to keep his secrets, Theo said ruefully. Makes me wonder if he's got something to hide. Hermione put her head down and gulped her wine just as the conversation took an awkward tone for her. Awkward in the sense that Hermione was about to find out exactly what Draco had to hide. You know me, Theodore, Draco told him in a low, menacing voice, stretching his legs fully in front of him. His intimidating size fully showcased. I don't like to kiss and tell. Pansy smirked. Luckily for you, I did quite a lot of that at Hogwarts. Hermione frowned, and she was still she's still bloody well at it now, too. She saw Draco smirk back at Pansy before leaning forward to pour himself another whiskey. You gave quite the rap back in school, Pans. Don't think I ever really thanked you for that. He told the witch with a small laugh. Is he shit, Pansy? Theo asked mockingly. Please tell me he was shit. That it was all just a lie to make us mere mortals cry ourselves to sleep at night at the thought of never comparing to the Slytherin prince. Draco stuck 2 fingers up in Draco's direction, which is a big F you to France. If you are French and they do this to you, it's more offensive than any other culture. I said it in my other video, but if you want me to know, I'll say it in another video too. So, it's actually one of my favorite things, or bite my thumb. Draco stuck 2 fingers in Theo's direction as he drank his drink. Okay. I'm not saying a word, he said as Hermione glanced up at him. For a second he caught her eye. I always let the lady be the judge. Well, we're about to find out if the rest of you can put your money where your mouths are. So, so to speak. Pansy announced, putting down her wine glass. So, who wants to go first? The boys all pointed at each other in turn. Clearly, the cat had suddenly mauled out their tongues. Pansy tapped her foot impatiently, and then turned to Theo. You, me? He asked innocently, pointing to himself. Why me? Because you're one of mine, and I'm selfish and I want to go first, Pansy told him in a whiny voice. What about Potter? Theo protested, pointing at the other male. Oi, don't bring me into it. She wants you, Harry answered defensively, but took 2 massive gulps of his fire whiskey. Pansy pulled up a chair in the middle of the living room and motioned for Theo to get himself up and sit on it, huffing and puffing about the unfairness of life. Theo reluctantly took off his hat, coat, and scarf before setting his drink down on the coffee table and going to sit on the chair in front of Pansy. Hermione, can you get the vial for me? It's in Theodore's coat pocket, please. As everyone made idle chit-chat, Hermione shifted her way over to the coat next to Draco, bending slightly to dig through the pockets. As she turned, the backs of her calves brushed against his thigh. Hermione could have sworn she heard him take in a small intake of breath at the touch. Warring with herself, she bit her lip, and she instantly felt his eyes attach themselves to her face, up on the action. Don't do that in front of him. It gets, and you will understand in the future. Yay, fun. Let's keep on going. Her fingers reached for the vial, but the intensity of the heat of his gaze made her look sideways at him. He wasn't looking for her eyes. He hadn't even noticed that she was watching. She was watching him. She was too busy fixating on the lip caught between her teeth. He was too busy controlling his breathing and calming his exterior to see that she was staring at him intently. It was mere seconds, but it felt like so much more. As Hermione let go of her lip between her teeth, she looked away from him. The only telltale sign of her taking him in was the blush on her cheeks. She felt his eyes avert, and he brought a fist up to cough into, as he looked away completely and opened another button on his Oxford, which is, if you get one just to buy one, it's about $3,000 or so more in pounds. And then I saw, like, if you want to get, like, custom made, it's like in $36,000. I was like, oh, money! He got some money. Marry his ass. That's what my mom's like. Is he cute? Got money? Yeah, he got money. He's cute and all. Marry him. He's shit personality. No. Then don't marry him. Looking bothered by something, Hermione regained composure and brought the vial to Pansy, whose eyebrows were raised in a telling way, and the black-haired witch mouthed very good to her, seeing the whole thing play out in front of her. Right, Theo, she said, suddenly becoming serious. Drink this and we can get started. See what you're really all about. Theo eyed it suspiciously before pulling out the stopper and smelling it. Oh, raspberry ripple and coconut. Harry raised an eyebrow. Does the potion have a trace of armamentia in it? He asked curiously. I remember smelling my favorite scents within that in 6th year. Pansy nodded. Only small increments. It helps to build up the senses. I think. Make the fantasy as strong and as believable as possible. It's an expensive potion to stock and buy. You want to make sure you're getting your money's worth. Pansy, really did have great sense at times, especially when it came to money and Devil's Tango. Put them both together and Pansy was lethal. Theo took one last sniff before shrugging. Oh well, he said, holding the vial up to toast everyone in the room before putting the vial to his lips. Bottoms up. See you all on the other side. The pink liquid disappeared. The blacks of Theo's eyes turned pink. And, oh shit, breathed Blaze, the situation currently drawing down on him as he watched Theo's unmoving body sitting straight up on the chair. Hermione looked over and saw Pansy bring out a small 5-by-7-inch rectangle mirror with pink edging. Walking back up to Theo, she grabbed his hand and pressed down Theo's and her thumb up on the mirror before dropping his hand again. What's happening? Harry asked as he walked up behind Pansy and peered into the mirror. Has it worked? Hermione could see nothing but their reflections in the mirror. Just give it a minute, Pansy said, impatient, as everyone started to crowd around her. Yeah, bitch, back up. Sorry, I'm getting Q-tips for my ears. Sorry. It needs time to access the part of his brain that. Suddenly, there was a blinding white light bouncing out of the mirror. It caused everyone to shield their eyes and take a step backwards. Hermione stepped back onto her left foot and found her back colliding with some bodies. Very broad front. She didn't need to look around to know who it was. Sorry, she said quietly as she turned her head to the side, unable to face him. Unable to see his face at the top of her head. Didn't quite reach his shoulders. His chest still seemed to be pressed up against her back, giving her a warm and tingly feeling. "No, you're not, Granger," he whispered back in a gruff voice, his breath wisping past her ear, making her own breath catch. He said it just loud enough for her to hear. When he finally he stepped out of her space, he left her back cold, but he was still able to see the mirror from over the top of her head, still where Pansy still had holding it. "Oh, look," Pansy said, excitedly squealing in delight. It's working! It's working! Look! I can see him! I can see Theo!" She stopped dead. Her mouth suddenly gaped open as Pansy watched the mirror with the others, unable to take her eyes away. Hermione's eyes widened at the sight before her. "Oh no! Oh dear, Theodore, you naughty boy." "He likes someone." So, yeah, sorry, there was an ad. So, he likes someone. I'm not going to say who yet. The pacing game. 1 hour later, Theodore Nott sat with his head in his hands. Hermione was not 100% sure that he was even completely conscious, as he had not moved within the last few minutes. He did, however, curse explicitives under his breath as he sat there, and so at least he wasn't dead. I'm getting some cherries out of the fridge. My mom told me to take the cherries out of the fridge, and I'm hungry, so I'm gonna make a sandwich. Make a fucking sandwich, bitch. Out of my way, biatch. I'm on this. Okay, sorry. I wanted to get my stuff out first. Okay. So at least he wasn't dead. Nobody wanted to look at each other. It was far too awkward. Even Pansy seemed to be lost for words as she sat on a little footstool beside Theo, tapping his knee sympathetically, as he let out small wails of anguish every now and again. Harry piped up, causing everyone whiplash as they turned their heads to him for breaking the silence. "It wasn't as bad as you think," Blaise snorted, but then swallowed his laugh to disguise his mirth. "Yeah, mate, it was a little romantic," Hermione added with a suggestion, hoping her voice sounded hopeful enough to make Theo feel a little better. "Because, a massage that leads to sex can be quite lazy." Draco finished for her from his place on the love seat behind her. His body was large that he practically took up the whole space. Only Theodore Nott could have a fantasy in which he lies back, lets the lady do all the work. She did not do all the work, in the end anyway, Theo protested with a sigh. Hermione flushed. What the hell was that? Ooh. Oh, okay, thank goodness. I thought it was the cherries. But no, it's nothing. It's just... There we go. I had one cherry. Okay. Sorry. Theo protested with a sigh. Hermione flushed. It might have looked a little lazy at first, but she had to admit that she had actually found it highly erotic to stand there and watch. Theodore quite clearly had some imagination when it came to foreplay. Although the other various scenarios they had turned into, both before settling on the main act, did make Hermione's eyes widen slightly. At one point, even Theo looked like he wasn't quite sure what was going to happen. But the way he moved, heat pooled between her legs yet again. Within the last hour, she felt like she could have soaked her knickers completely. Between that, she saw and heard with Theo's little encounter and minor situation that was occurring with Malfoy as Theo's fantasy unfolded, she felt like, ooh, I'm spitting everywhere. Darn it. Theo's fantasy unfolded. She felt like she needed a cold shower and possibly even a vibrator. Jeez, the massage isn't going to ruin my reputation. Theo started, shaking his head in defeat. The butt plug? Blaze offered innocently. The gag? Harry interjected, a smile on his face. Your finish face? Pansy said innocently. Theo wailed again. You can all piss off! He huffed, brought himself out of the hot seat before taking a tumbler of whiskey and draining the whole thing. How was I supposed to know Luna Lovegood would be the actual freak between the sheets? He shook his head. It was a drunken one time a year or so ago, and then all I've been able to think about is riding crops. And her rather persistent need for Star Wars roleplay. Pansy and Blaze widened their eyes. You didn't need to hear that. I shouldn't have told you that. Theo pointed accusingly at them. Taking a gulp of whiskey that was handed to him. You did not hear that. Yeah. Okay. Hermione and Harry laughed knowingly. They were both fully aware of how Luna's mind worked. It turned out one fateful roll in the sack with her a few years ago was all Theo's imagination needed to continually run wild with more fantasies about her. They were all about her. Everyone thinks they're a freak until they meet an actual freak. Draco interrupted from his place on the love seat, a smirk on his lips as he viewed Theo. Then they suddenly find themselves tied up with a butt plug stuck between their ass cheeks, wondering how on earth they managed to get themselves into the position on a Tuesday night. Not helpful in the slightest, thank you, Gaganator. Nice. Giganator. Giganator, whatever. Theo sniffed indignantly as he downed another glass of whiskey. Hermione put her head down. Every time she heard Malfoy's gruff, gravelly voice, it brought back the heat between her legs at the thought of his innocent breathing near her ear and his low tone as he spoke to her quietly. knowing that no one else could hear him as they were too busy enthralled by watching Theo's adventure. She wasn't even sure whether she had even imagined the whole thing, or if she had indeed stood directly behind him. But he stood directly behind her the whole entire time. 1 hour earlier. Is it possible to throw up your own intestines? I'm sure this is illegal in some countries. Turn it off, Pansy, for the love of gosh! Turn it off! I can't grasp control of it properly, Pansy exclaimed as she grappled with the flashing images on the screen. There were too many of them. Theodore Knott was a randy little bastard with multiple fantasies were warring with each other on the screen. Told you that butt plug wasn't just for the women. Hermione heard Draco's voice breathe from behind her, close to her back. The mirror currently... I will stop the mirror stuff when it gets to the actual mirror stuff. You know what I mean? What? You bitch! Who did this? Who did this? They edited it and they took out all of the mirror, like to tell which one's the mirror parts and which one's not. Ugh, yikes. Okay. Behind her, close to her back. The mirror currently showed them the image of Theo bound and gagged with an apple in his mouth, being tickled with a feather on a bed with a blonde girl inserting said butt plug into his rectum. Blaise winced and covered his eyes. Change the channel for the love of all that is sacred and holy, Pansy! It might be like a radio wave, Harry instructed, and then winced as Pansy fiddled with the mirror, and a different, particular sorted fantasy, including the same blonde-haired girl, and a riding crop, came into view. Theo was face down on the bed this time, hands bound behind his back, and an apple still... Wait, what the fuck is this? Try horning the frequency that is strongest. That might be the one that he desires the most. He wasn't lying, Pansy mused, turning her head to the side to view Theo properly. He does have quite a nice ass. Is that? Harry asked, curiously, bending in further to get a better look. His glasses on the end of his nose. Luna? If it was, then Luna Lovegood was handy with anal beads. Oh my gosh. Pansy tittered. Yes, he's been secretly obsessed with her since he shagged her a year or so ago. He's been in all of these flash fantasies so far. Pansy observed the leather outfit that Fantasy Luna was wearing. So stereotypical of you, Theo. I'm so disappointed. She tutted. Theodore Knott and Luna Lovegood. Who could possibly have thought they would be possible? Opposite of each other, and yet their minds met a sexual level quite obviously. Does she know he feels like that about her? Hermione asked as her eyes widened at the feather basque and stockings that Luna appeared to be wearing. Oh, jeez. Has he ever told her? Never. He's never said a word. Draco said in a low voice from behind her back, making her skin pimple and goose flesh. He's just let it simmer away inside of him for a while. Scared of the rejection, his voice became like a growl. Imagine that. Imagine that, Pansy said in an innocent voice as she casually glanced back at Draco, ignoring Theo's muffled cries in the mirror as he was being continually whipped in the ass with the crop. Is it just a whip? Imagine wanting someone so much but never giving into the temptation because you were too scared of the implications. Hermione put her head down and she heard Draco take a deep breath from behind her and felt him shuffle his feet on the floor and moved his front just the smallest bit closer to her. I think I found it, Pansy, Blaze said. Wait, we didn't even get to it, did we? No, it's still the same shit. Damn it. I think we found it, Pansy, Blaze said cheerily as the mirror flashed the scene within it, and it became clear and less static. This might be the one. It's clearer than the others. Hermione craned her head towards the mirror a little, and she felt her mouth go dry at the sight. The Ravenclaw's dormitory swung into view, and Hermione watched as Theo and Luna appeared in the doorway. Yeah. No. Would you mind doing my pecs? Like, it's the massage part. He asked with a grunt. I used them quite a lot while playing Quidditch with the boys yesterday. Oh, please. Hermione heard Draco's low tone whisper to her right, so close to her back to get a good view of the mirror, that his abdomen was almost flush against her. Is this the best he's got? Is this the best he's got? He whispered so quietly, near to her ear, that she knew that she was the only one who could hear him. She chanced to glance to her right, and you think you could do better? She chanced to glance to her right. And you think you can do better? She asked him. Her voice was quiet so only he can hear. She felt his eyes upon her, staring at her intently. Don't challenge me, he growled and sent a shiver down her spine. Hermione said nothing, but kept watching the scene unfold in front of her. She was fully aware now that Draco's presence was about to take her away from the task at hand. She had to try adrenaline for the sake of her own sanity. Hermione honed back. Sorry, I'm looking through. She was fully aware of Draco's presence and was about to take her away from the task at hand. She had to try adrenaline for the sake of her own sanity, honed back on the mirror. If that was me, I'd grab her hips firmly and rock her against me. That voice, that rough and ready voice. Make her hit the spot she needs straight away. Have her head thrown back in no time. His tone was so dark and dangerous, and his voice so low and close to her ear. Now that she could feel his breath on her neck, the way he described everything as the images played out on the screen, it just brought it to life all the more. I like a challenge. Hermione shuddered and tried to steady herself against his words as she watched as the couple in the mirror looked at each other, panting, and only a couple of pieces of fabric separating them now. Luna did not. Oh, wait, whatever. Not looking. Ba ba ba. If he massaged it in just a little, the right place there, he could have piqued her. Boing! That's what I'm gonna call him. Boing! Through her shirt. Draco whispered in, and Hermione felt her abdomen rise and fall against. Felt his abdomen rise and fall against her back. Half of the fun is the anticipation before the touch of the bare skin. The feel of the fabric against her taut, boing, would have her making all kinds of noises. His voice was raspy as he talked. They don't need to be big, over-exaggerated touches either. Hermione sucked in air when she felt large fingers with their feather-like touch skimming along on her clothed hip. The ghost of a sensation, not knowing if she was actually enjoying it all or not, had her head spinning just enough to get the right reaction. Hermione tried her best to concentrate on Theo and Luna. Sorry. I don't think he wants the nitty-gritty of Luna and Theo doing it, so. Hermione felt Draco's fingers flutter against her hip bone as Theo and Luna moaned, and Hermione bit her lip to hold in a small squeak as his breath ghosted her ear, breathing as heavily as she was. If you can get the right angle through the clothes, you're practically effing each other senseless. Hermione saw him look at her face from the corner of his eye. He was bound to see how flushed she was. It's all about the pressure. His fingers lay a little firmer on her hip bone, but he made no move to pull her back against him. Get the pressure just right, and you'll be screaming for your life. Hermione was in big trouble. Her legs were trembling, and he was barely touching her. His words and the way he said them, so low and intimate, just for her. But she had to try and ignore them, and enough to concentrate on Leo. This was research. They needed the research. Theo broke away. Oh, yeah. Wait. Blowing on her boings would cause more of an effect before he touched her there properly. Hermione squeezed her legs together when she felt her hip being squeezed lightly again, the minimum of touches, and it made her own boing peak. Like I said, it's the anticipation. He bent a little lower to her ear, the not knowing how far he will take it, or he'll stop. And as he said the word stop, his fingers weren't on her hip anymore. She had to swallow a small groan. Had to swallow a small groan that wanted to escape her throat. Hermione tried her hardest to focus on the mirror. Her mind, now swimming with anticipation and frustration, from few words and small touches. Sometimes you don't need a touch at all, came Draco's voice again in her ear, just as Theo pushed in, sounding as affected as she was by the erotic display in the mirror. Sometimes words, the sounds are just enough to make you suspend on the edge. Hermione felt lost in all manner of different sensations at once. When a woman moans in your ear, you'll do anything to make her do it again. She could hear and see the mirror. She could hear and feel Draco, his low breathing next to her ear, and his abdomen still rising and falling against her back, closing in around her like she was about to be engulfed by him. And his continuous erotic narrative was causing her blood to boil in the most delicious of ways. The spontaneous moans are the best. Hermione closed her eyes against his words for a second. Trying to regain composure. The one that escaped from the back of her throat. Hold on. Sorry. The ones you make you whimper with your head thrown back. Hermione let out a small breath, licking her bottom lip. Those are the ones that really get the man close, right on the edge. Shit, the imagery. He was making her mind spin. She didn't even know if that was his intention or not. She needed to keep her eyes trained on Theo's fantasy. Had to keep it going elsewhere. Hermione was transfixed by the way Theo's hips moved between Luna's legs. They looked quite beautiful together as they moved. She chanced to glance to her right and caught Malfoy's eyes watching the couple intently, as his own bottom lip caught between his teeth. Then he looked and spotted Hermione watching him. He gave her a primal and dangerous that she was sure if they were alone, he would have fucking ruined her right then and there in the middle of the living room. It was then that she realized that Pansy was right. Then Draco had never truly had this, and if he did, he wouldn't have been able to do it for long without hurting the woman. He'd never been able to lose himself to the feeling, always needing to keep control. Watching Theo must have been killing him. because he couldn't have it for himself. Theo kissed Luna. Wait, what? No. Hermione's breath caught in her throat. Oh, Theodore does like to live dangerously, doesn't he? Draco whispered with a small chuckle. Nothing like the pacing game. He's got to make her finish before he can get himself off. I love that little game. Draco talked like he knew what he was talking about, probably something that he had done many times before back in his Hogwarts days. Hermione gulped, but watched on. Hermione sucked in a breath, and she felt Draco tense behind her. Of course, that was something that he had never been able to achieve. They're talking about finishing on a woman. Hermione's eyes hovered between watching the mirror and watching Malfoy out of the corner of her eye for his reaction. Theo looked at Luna for a moment before deciding his fate. Wait, what? Damn it. Hermione glanced up at Draco, and her core contracted at the look in his eyes. He looked dark, dangerous, like he was on the edge of something himself. His abdomen was still pressed quite tightly against his back. And when Theodore shuddered and came at... Shit. That never happened. She felt Draco's fingers returning to her hip and grip it tighter than he had before, as if not even realizing that he had done it. He brought her ass against his crotch. Hermione held in a groan, but she said nothing, instead trying to steady her breathing and then looked back at the mirror. Luna must have left Theo's warm cum. Shoot! Son of a biscuit. I didn't say that. Don't know what you're talking about. The mirror went blank, showing only the reflections of 5 faces whose each held a mixture of arousal, horror, and complete mortification of what they had just witnessed. Hermione heard a heavy breath in her ear, then felt Draco's hand and body heat leave hers. And he seemed to be moving away, going to start. I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what? I'm going to take a break. Hold on. Hermione heard a heavy breath in her ear and then felt Draco's hand and body leave from hers. He seemed to be moving away, going to sit on the little love seat on the other side of the living room, away from everyone to collect his thoughts. Harry went straight for his whiskey glass, filling up the tumbler 3 times, knocking back each one before sitting in an armchair looking frazzled. Blaise was rubbing the back of his neck, shaking his head and looking like he was either contemplating throwing up or going to the bathroom for a wank. Pansy sat with Theo, who she was slowly bringing around from the Erised, however you want to say it. She had pulled up a footstool and sat next to him, pulling his arm and leg gently as he came to. As Theo opened his eyes, they widened easily, and then his head instantly went into his hands. "Oh no," he groaned. "You saw the..." You know, what we talked about before and we couldn't stop laughing about. "Didn't you?" It very piped up, causing everyone whiplash as they turned their heads to see him for breaking the silence. "It wasn't as bad as you think." Half an hour later, Hermione bid Harry farewell as he disappeared through the flue. After Pansy claiming the erased effect a great success, she then claimed it was far too late for the evening to indulge in any more fantasies, and that everyone would need to wait next Friday. They would meet up again at the Golden Snitch, which is the bar, before making their way back to Draco's to try it on someone else. "Why my flat?" Draco asked her suspiciously. "Why not yours?" Pansy smirked at him. "Because it's your birthday next Saturday." Oh gosh, his birthday. I remember. "Oh my," she told him matter-of-factly. "And I thought it might be good to organize a little sleepover." Hermione's mouth went dry. She looked at the ground and she was going to kill Pansy Parkinson. "I don't celebrate my birthday plans, and you know that," he warned her. As usual, she paid no attention. "No point arguing with me, Draco. Your flat has enough room for all of us to get very drunk and stay over." Theo and Blaise agreed, stating that they didn't much like the flu when they had drunk one too many. Hermione saw Draco huff before shaking his head, scratching his neck, and giving in to the dark-haired beauty. "Whatever," was all he said. Pansy clapped her hands excitedly before putting on her coat to get ready to get home herself. She looked over at Hermione. "You coming, Granger?" She eyed her with a raised eyebrow, the type of raised eyebrow that had Hermione knowing that she wanted to talk specifically about Draco. Hermione nodded, going about putting her own coat on. She said her goodbyes to Blaise as he disappeared through the flue and looked up at Draco to thank him for letting them come and spend time in his new home. She took him in as he stood there, hands in the pockets of his trousers, and his tie loose enough slid down with his button still unopened. When he stood tall with his shoulders back, he must have been between 6'4" and 6'5", a colossal. And he was looking right at her, waiting for her to be the first to speak, always biding his time. "Good night, Draco, and thank you for letting us invade your house this evening," she told him in a quiet voice, meeting his eyes and seeing the intensity there that she was expecting. She saw a smirk fall on his lips, and his eyesight fell up on her thighs again for a second. Ugh, creep. Before he looked up at her face. "No, Granger." He practically growled, looking her dead in the eyes. "Thank you." She knew he wasn't talking about coming to his flat for a social drink. Shit, she was in so much fucking trouble with this man. "Don't you know it, sweetheart? I have looked ahead. It's effed up." And, so I'm going to end it here. If it lets me get out. Please. Thank you. And we'll do part 4 and 5. Well, I have 5 already read up, but I probably shouldn't have read 5 because I think I read what happens in 5. You know, how do I say that? I read the mirror parts, and I don't want to read the mirror parts because you guys don't like them, and I definitely get very uncomfortable when reading them. But it will get a little uncomfy with the relationship between Draco Malfoy and Hermione when they get, let's just say, closer to each other. Because, yeah. But I mean, it turns romantic later, sooner. Well, it's already romantic, but it's just gradual, and it does get a little graphic, but not too graphic for you. I always try to keep it at least underrated R a little bit. I try, but then again, sometimes X comes out of me. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this one. I hope you enjoyed me redoing it, and right after I post this, and maybe after a day, I will delete my old one, and I hope you approve of this one being a better result, because this is the results from 6:30 p.m. on today of the July 6th, and you guys said, hold on my channel, 74% was yes, redo the whole series that I was doing, and that's what I'm doing. Thank you guys for watching. Give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below which was your favorite part. Mine, I have no idea. To be honest, I have no idea which one was my favorite part. I have to say it was kind of them talking, and she kept on like going in and out of like flashbacks, and she was just like, what happened? It was like, you didn't miss much. It was just gross. Theodore was, of course. Now we know Theodore's fantasy about Luna. Yikes, right? But whatever. I hope you enjoy this in the future. And for new subscribers, subscribe. Well, new people, sorry. Subscribe, put on push notifications, give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below if you want me to read another series. I have a couple of Draries I was recommended, and which are really long. If you have any other, like Dramione, or I don't know how I'm going to say this, Drawn, which is really Draco X Ron, which I never thought could be a thing. But at the same time, I don't.
Well, the first order of business is for all of the new kids to be sorted into their proper wizarding houses. The houses, of course, being Gryffindor for kids who are brave and just, Ravenclaw for the emo goths, Slytherin for future politicians, and Hufflepuff for kids who never shut up about being in Hufflepuff! Now, before this, the school headmaster, some old dude named Dumbledore, yeah, okay, more like Dumbledore, you know what I'm saying?